Hi, I'm Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to BoxBox F1 Pod. As you can see, if you were watching the last episode, I am once again in a new location. I was staying with my friend last week, and now I'm in a hotel in London and very excited to be central and walkable to everything. My legs are going to fall off. Also, if you were listening to last week's episode, you know that I went to the F1 arcade to watch the Las Vegas Grand Prix. I know I promised some of you to vlog, and I did try. Turns out I'm not good at vlogging, so the footage might be slightly subpar. I still have to parse through it, but I will be talking about my experience there. It was like an incredible environment to be in. So we'll be getting into that once I start talking about the race. But first, it's time for the digital warm-up. Lap 1, off-duty F1. Okay, Valtteri continues to live his best life. He's released a butt-ass calendar for 2024, which I actually found out through Daniel Ricciardo talking about it, which I think is great from Danny, and I think it's even better from Valtteri for even coming up with this. I will definitely be getting one as soon as I can find how. Also, Max was on the cover of Time magazine, and someone turned it into a meme where they basically recreated the Time magazine cover for the other drivers, and I was literally dying. I will share the link to the whole thing in the show notes, but I wanted to talk through a couple of them first. So Max's Time magazine headline was "Unstoppable: What Fuels Max Verstappen's Formula One Success." The next one was Charles, and they changed Time to "We Are Checking," and then the headline is "Unlucky: What Fuels Charles Leclerc's next year is our year." And then Esteban's was changed from Time to "Time Penalty," and the headline is "Stoppable: What Fuels Esteban Ocon's Time Penalties." Honestly, an even better meme would be to make him into Ron Stoppable from Kim Possible. Logan Sargent's The Times title was changed to "Miles," and the headline is "Kilometer, what the fuck is that?" Just some excellent content. Also, in other news, we had a couple of birthdays. Lando turned 24. He's just a baby. I can't do the meme. You know the meme? Or the TikTok? He's just a baby. Christian also celebrated his birthday, though I have a feeling he's less of a baby than Lando. But the picture he posted of him celebrating was with Nui, Max, Checo, and Dr. Helmut Marko. What a party. Also, Carlos went on vacation to the Bahamas, and he posted a bizarrely hilarious combination of photos that are somehow really dorky and also bordering douchey. There's a picture of him with his snorkel goggles and thing on, and the tube looking hilarious. And then there was photos of him, he posted videos of him golfing with his shirt off, which is fine. It just feels a little fratty for Carlos. It's just a very broad spectrum of vibes that he had at this vacation. Also, Fernando was on the cover of GQ's Spain Men of the Year. And the picture they chose of him is of him standing in the background of a bouquet of flowers, which made me laugh because do you guys remember last year when there was a whole thing going about how all Fernando does is sniff flowers, and there were these random clips of him coming up behind people in interviews just sniffing a plant or walking around hospitality just sniffing flowers. So I love that they did that. Whoever organized that shoot is an F1 fan, which I love. Okay, I have no specific moments for this point, but Verstappen is having a moment, and I know they've been having a moment forever, but the internet is super hyperfixated on their relationship, and there's an edit for every interaction, conversation, hug, existence in the same vicinity, and literally the entire of the internet sees them next to each other and goes, "Oh my god, Verstappen, hearts, hearts, hearts." Max and Charles do have a very wholesome relationship, but it's just taken a life of its own. Charles seems to have a wholesome relationship with everyone, honestly. And also when Max loves someone, his relationships are always great. Like him and Charles, and then him and Daniel. He's just so lovable. Also, side note, but in the post-race press conference, Max made a straight up reference to "it was just an incident" clip. And by reference, I mean he just quoted it, and Charles just like giggled. I just love how much Max loves that meme. I swear he references it any chance he gets. Okay, this is a bit random, but has anyone noticed that both Lance and Lando are attempting to grow the same type of facial hair? Slightly different success rate, though neither has fully grasped it, but it's like it's not the beard that connects with the sideburns, and it's not a goatee. It's like the hair that's around the whole mouth, like upper lip to chin, or it's supposed to be. Neither of them seem to be able to connect it. But like, why is this the vibe we're going for? It's kind of like shabby pirate, but I don't know if it's a good way, but they both seem to be going for the same aesthetic, and I don't know where they got this trend from, because I haven't seen it anywhere else. And I can't decide if I like it. I don't like it on Lando at all. I think if Lance went for the whole thing, I could like it. The whole shebang, though. Like, up to the top, you know? All right, lap 2, Netflix golf special. Okay, so I do have a couple of thoughts about this. First, whoever is, like, hosting the event was, like, not the best choice. I don't know who this lady is, but it kind of felt like she got a crash course on both F1 and golf, like, right before this event. Like, who is she? The clear host choice was Lily. Maybe Lizzie, but, like, Lily for sure. Why wasn't she asked? She'd be great. She knows both worlds. And she can make fun of Alex. Speaking of making fun of Alex, though, so there was this one, like, they caught Alex talking during the live event of, they had the big Squid Games doll blown up massively on the green or whatever it's called. And as Alex is walking by, Pierre goes, that thing looks really creepy. And Alex goes, kind of looks like my girlfriend. Later on in the live, Alex fell mid-swing, which is hilarious. And on his post about the whole thing, about how he tried not to embarrass himself, but he did anyway, on the post, which included like a clip of him falling, Lily commented, "Karma is the guy talking trash, falling down on his swing." She's so cool. We really need to use her more. How is she not being used more? I love her. Also, Carlos won the entire thing. And then during the ceremony, where they, by the way, got the ugliest blazers ever, they were like checkered and said F1 or Netflix on it. Whatever it said, it was ugly. And Carlos was holding the trophy and it just fell out of his hands. He just watched it fall. And then he was just holding it up in multiple pieces. In conclusion, though, I think it was a fun crossover. I just think it could have been done better. Primarily, I think they probably should have focused less on like shoving every possible celebrity in front of the camera, and maybe including more people who are like familiar with both sports. There are plenty of celebs that love F1, and everyone loves golf now for some reason. So like Tom Holland, excellent choice. Mark Wahlberg would have still been fine had they included him with his daughter, because I think that's his tie to F1. Otherwise, he doesn't really give a fuck. And she's very cute. So I think that would have been much more of a fun combination, and ultimately a better host who knows what she's talking about. Like, no offense to this girl, but it kind of sounded like she just didn't get either sport. I would get maybe being on knowing one sport and not so much the other. But she just seemed kind of new to everything, except for Netflix. She just kept referencing Netflix. All right, lap 3, trackside in Vegas. It's a big lap, guys. So first, I just want to get some random stuff out of the way. So there was this moment from like, when they do like the drivers go on stage and talk to the fans. Someone asked, which 2 drivers would you go out on a night out with? And there were some pretty great answers. Namely, Fernando, Lewis, and Daniel all said that they would choose Yuki after Daniel clarified that Yuki can drink, which is just rude. But my absolute favorite answer was Valtteri, who just deadpanned that he wouldn't take anyone because they would just slow him down. He's like Kimmy, but also funny intentionally, you know? Like, Kimmy would have continued to deadpan, whereas Valtteri said this and like chortled at his joke. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. Great banter. All right, let's move on to the first opening ceremony. I guess there's only one opening ceremony. The other was more like an intro to the whatever. So the opening ceremony, there was a lot of really random performances. 30 Seconds to Mars performed, and they were wearing track and suit inspired outfits, but they just looked like they work at a Jiffy Lube. Like, it just didn't work. Then Keith Urban performed, Andra Day, Kylie Minogue, the Blue Man Group, which, by the way, hilarious moment from on Sky when Natalie was like live and the Blue Men just appeared out of nowhere, and she like was so alarmed she like couldn't get her bearings. She just like could not calm down and continue. She kept trying to like recompose herself, and she just couldn't because they were just lurking around her. It was very funny. Someone named Bishop Briggs performed, and then Journey performed, or like a Frankenstein version of Journey, with like new band members in there. Then Balvin performed in what I can only describe as like Hagrid's hazmat suit. It was alarmingly oversized and unnecessary. Steve Aoki performed. By the way, on the grid walk on Sunday or Saturday night, he told Brundle that he thinks this is the greatest sporting event to have ever happened and to ever happen in the future, which seems a bit much, a bit of an intense take on the situation, but here we are. I think this might have been his first race, and it shows. Don't hold me on that. Maybe it's not his first race, but I kind of think it is. Tiesto DJ'd. Also, does anyone else feel like Tiesto has like serial killer vibes? I don't know if I think that just because he looks like that guy who played Hannibal Lecter, and then who also played the new Grindelwald in the he replaced Johnny Depp in the movies, because that guy played a serial killer, so he looks like one. But now I don't know if I'm just projecting that. Anyway, John Legend popped up out of nowhere and performed All of Me, which seemed like a weird choice of song for the situation. Or maybe not. And then will.i.am popped up and unfortunately performed his like F1 song. And don't worry, guys, he has reassured us that he will also be in Abu Dhabi, because we can never get enough of will.i.am. I will commend him on his commitment to F1. He knows F1. So there was a cool transition from his song into the F1 theme song before a presenter, like over a speaker, began to announce each team and the drivers, and they popped up like the fucking Hunger Games. Honestly, I saw the Hunger Games edits before I actually watched the full ceremony, and I was dying when I saw the whole thing like in full, because for real, it was like the Hunger Games. Like, even without the Hunger Games music in the background, it still felt very Hunger Games. I think that part of that is that our drivers are just not sort of built for this spectacle. So they all kind of look like horror-struck children who have suddenly realized they're about to die. And everyone's cheering them on. Like, they have the same sort of like deer in the headlights facial expression. Other than, of course, like a select few, like Daniel Ricciardo and Pierre were just like thriving. And also it was so weird. I thought they would pop up and stay, but they just like pop up and go immediately down. Like, I don't think the platform stops. They literally go up and then immediately down. Fernando's wave was so old man. It was very like, yep. George Russell did a thumbs up as the platform was going down, so all that was like still showing was his thumbs up before they fully disappeared. Also, Max, we know, has been super vocal about his feelings about the Las Vegas Grand Prix, but seeing his face during the ceremony took it to like a whole nother level. He like really hates it. Like, he really doesn't want to be there. But yeah, so after they introduced everyone, they all came back up, and now they're like, it was like 2 teams per platform. And so they were all talking to each other, and they like relaxed a little bit. They were all clearly bitching about the situation, but they looked a bit more normal there than like being weirdly like hoisted into the air and then back down. So like, I think it's like cool in theory, but like if I was watching a movie, I would think this sort of thing is super cool. But like in real life, it feels weird, or maybe it's just because I know them. I know them so well, but maybe it's because I like know who they are and it just looks so unnatural on them that it looked weird, but it didn't not look cool. I see where they were coming from. Okay, so there was also a red carpet event that Max just like actively skipped and had like no shame about. My favorite part about this red carpet event though is that the fact that the fashion energy that we get on the grid was exactly replicated on the red carpet. Literally everyone, even Guan Yu, came in their uniforms, except Lewis, who came in like a fabulous, like, he had two outfits, I think. He had one that was like a black blazer and black pants and it was like a V, and then he had like a sparkly tracksuit set. That was really cool. The only other one who towed the line was George, who wore like Tommy Hilfiger, but that's like a team sponsor, so is it really going that crazy? What I think is funny is imagining George like getting dressed for this event, because I can see him being in his room being like, do I wear my team kit? Do I not wear my team kit? And then he's like, I bet Lewis is gonna get dressed up, so like I'll get dressed up. And then he put this wild outfit on and he's like, yeah, we're on par now. I don't know if they were told to wear their team kits and then Mercedes was just like, fuck that. But like, I will say, I think the rest of them look weird because this is supposed to be like an event and they all look like they like showed up to a work conference. Whereas Lewis is actually dressed for his environment. And like, I think he looked great. 10 out of 10 for his outfit. Truly. It really starting to make me realize that like my biggest issue with his outfits is the environment. It just like really stands out. But he looked great. There are some other issues occasionally, but really he has the swag and the vibe, and when he gets an outfit right and the environment right, he is excellent. Speaking of clothes for a hot minute, who the fuck thought that the Red Bull track suits were a good idea? Like, they're basically supposed to emulate the Elvis suit. So they have like a gold band for a belt around their pants, around the waist, and Max's is white with stars and Checo's is red with white stars, which coincidentally looks almost identical to Ferrari's, which is very weird. But why was this decision made? Like, no wonder Max was mad the whole weekend. It was literally the ugliest suit I've ever seen. Okay, so the second opening ceremony or intro, I don't know if this is an opening ceremony, but like it was whatever happened before the driver's parade. So they were announced in the same way they were announced in Miami. And I guess the thinking here was that they wouldn't be making the drivers line up awkwardly while everyone gets announced. And instead they would have like an action. So like they would just get into their car and technically drive away. It was still fucking weird. Like, I don't know if the process wasn't communicated clearly or not. I'm honestly like, they're trying so hard to make the F1 drivers NFL or NBA or like boxers. I think that's probably the best comparison is like boxing or wrestling or whatever, but they're just like not that. Like, yeah, F1 has been a flashy spectacle, but like other than a few of these drivers, they don't know what to do in scenarios like these. They're not built for it. So even though technically, like in this situation, all they had to do was go to their car, they still struggled. They looked so awkward and uncomfortable, except for Daniel. Daniel was in his environment. He was thriving. Okay, so basically the man who introduced them, I don't know who he is, but his name is Bruce Buffer. And I guess this is his job all the time. He's like an internationally known sports announcer. My bad. He is so intense. He reminds me of that guard from Princess Diaries 2 who announced everyone when they entered a room. Remember when he hit the stick? It was like, Oscar Piastri has to go potty. That's like what I was getting from him. Why was he so intense? Also, his flashcards were very aggressively highlighted and penned and like everything. Like he made a lot of notes. I'm assuming about pronunciation, which I appreciate. Like he tried. We didn't want another Chuck Leclerc situation on our hands. And also everyone during the golf thing kept calling Carlos Sainz, and I wanted to kill myself. But like he had spelled Charles out Sharl, and he had spelled signs out Signs. So like I appreciated the effort. But this man was there specifically to call these names out, and he was not interacting with anyone. He was not looking at anyone. He had one job, and that was to read these names. And he would not stray from that path. So, and sometimes it was fine. Like Kevin Magnuson came out and just like literally side-eyed him so hard and beelined as far away from this man as possible, whereas a lot of them seemed to think that he was going to be interviewing them, so they just like walked right up to him, and it was very awkward. So it was like half and half. Guan Yu walked into his car without even waiting for his introduction, so he was already sitting in his car when his name was read out. Same with Yuki. By the way, he loved saying Yuki's name. I think Yuki has a very good introduction, shouty name, Yuki Tsunoda, you know? The first most awkward one was the man was like, and the man racing for Thailand. And like Alex just like, as he said that, Alex just stopped in his tracks and like looked appalled and looked like he wanted to like reverse and like leave. He was like this, as if he just didn't hear the man announce everyone already and didn't know what to expect. He just looked so appalled that he was being introduced like that. Also, he also walked straight up to this man and was like staring at him, and the man fully ignored him. I think he was like pretending like he couldn't see anything around him. It was so weird. And so then Alex was like, oh, got it. Okay, so we're not talking. And then he tried to walk to his car, but he kept getting the wrong car. He walked to like 3 different cars trying to find where he was supposed to go. It's very funny. Also, Pierre loves this as much as Daniel. And I'm like convinced that Bruce watched those compilations of Daniel Ricciardo shouting Pierre Gasly's name, because he did it almost exactly the same. Side note, I'm pretty sure that Pierre was consulted on the new Alpine jackets because they look very cool. And he was like, I'm not wearing this shit unless it's cool. It seems like what's happened. Lance also just like fully stopped in his tracks when his name was read, when he realized what was happening, and like really seemed to consider going back also. Fernando just ignored it. He like was like, whatever, this is happening, I'm gonna ignore it. He like walked around Natalie trying to interview him and tried to get in his car, and she's like asking him questions, and the microphone is picking up and going, how do I open this? And he just like did not have time for any of it, but he was respectful-ish. Charles also walked straight up to Bruce, like stood on his carpet, and Bruce looked actually offended that Charles was standing on his carpet. And Charles quickly realized he was not meant to be speaking to this man. Side note, when George came out, also, he's always thumb upping. I think he feels awkward, so all he does is a thumbs up. But he got into his car, and you could see him like backseat driving his driver. He was like showing him where to go. It was kind of funny. Also, side note, had a lot of side notes. But I like the cars. I think it looks cool when they do their parade, but I kind of miss when they piled the drivers into the back of like a flatbed truck and like pulled them around the track. I thought that was funny. And now they're like sort of like separated. It was fun to watch them interact, you know? Okay, sorry, this is the last one, but the funniest one is Checo, who seems to have not been paying attention at all, because he walks straight up to Bruce, puts his hands in his pocket, and like leans back and just like awkwardly smiles. And he stands there for like a full minute. And I don't know why. And then I don't know why Bruce won't respond to him. And like Bruce just kept pretending like he wasn't actually standing there. And then Checo did like a full like office stare into the camera, and then starts like looking around and literally goes, where am I supposed to go? And then like it got even weirder, because suddenly Lewis hops out of his car, and then Checo hops into another car, and then Lewis hops into that car too. And it's like the smallest car that was there, and they're like squished into this car, sitting very awkwardly. I also forgot Max came out, but he looked so unenthused. It was literally the same facial expression he had at the opening ceremony. Also, speaking of Max and all the critiques he had of the Las Vegas Grand Prix, Lewis also once spoke up about how he didn't like that they were inconveniencing the locals, but really it was just Max, like, talking nonstop about how much he hated his arc. Like, he literally went through like a full, like, you could have like made an entire series with character development of Max from like start to finish of this one weekend, because he was shitting on this track beyond belief. He hated the whole weekend. It was the worst thing that ever happened to him. He hates the track. It's undrivable. He doesn't want to be there. And then he won. And then he was like, yeah, this was really fun. And worse than that, he like, during the last lap, his cooldown lap, he starts singing Viva Las Vegas on the radio. Like, what a character arc for him. How far we've come. Anyway, some of the stuff he said were actually hilarious. When the fans were not allowed to go to FP2 and were compensated with some coupons to the store, he said, if I were a fan, I would tear the whole place down. Regarding the opening ceremony, he said, we are just standing there looking like clowns. They kind of were. On the weekend as a whole, he said it's 99% show and only 1% sport. And he also said, I don't like all the things around it. I'm looking forward to trying to do the best I can, but I'm not looking forward to this. When asked what he would change about the GP weekend, he said, give me an A4 sheet of paper. Let's not even talk about that. He did have a kind of a wholesome quote where he said when he was a kid, like, for him, it was about the emotion the sport brought out in him, and that's like why he fell in love with it. And he really wished that FIA and F1 invested more into recreating that sort of magic. He kind of talked about it like Disney World, but he wishes that they would invest in that aspect of it, because he feels that the current setup and the current priorities are not conducive to falling in love with the sport in the same way that he did as a child. And that's a great segue into celebrities. Speaking of flash and glamour and unnecessary stuff, there were a lot of celebrities here. I did notice fewer influencers. Chris Olsen from TikTok was there, but that's the only influencer I think I actually clocked, which is very different than Miami. And I don't know if this was a pivot because there was so much backlash about the influencers being there, or if Vegas was just going for a different vibe than Miami, but definitely more celebrity heavy. There was a clip of Esteban Ocon presenting his Deadpool-themed helmet to Ryan Reynolds, who of course has invested in Alpine now. And I get it, but like, you've got the king of Riz at your fingertips. How do you send Esteban to meet Ryan and not Pierre, or at least both of them? I want Pierre and Ryan in the same room. I want to see Ryan's reaction to Pierre. I need to see it. Rob McElhenney, whose name I can't say, and his wife were there, also investors. Lupita Nyong'o was there. Patrick Dempsey presented the pole position Pirelli tire. Shaq was there. Justin Bieber waved the checkered flag. Beckham was hosting an F1 party that weekend, so he was there in like full force. Paris Hilton with McLaren. Rihanna and A$AP Rocky with Ferrari. And I think they were there because they're big Puma partners or whatever. Puma, F1, Rihanna, Puma. Oh, A$AP Rocky was like recreating Puma, making it cool or whatever. So that would explain why they were there. But honestly, the biggest travesty of this entire weekend is that Rihanna was there and she didn't perform Shut Up and Drive. Biggest travesty. Also Brad Pitt, Gordon Ramsay, Rod Stewart, and so many more. Many, many, many celebrities. Anyway, that concludes our digital warm-up. On to the race rhyme. Viva Las Vegas! Who thinks this weekend is going to be aces? Not Max Verstappen, that's for sure. And he'll give you a very detailed explanation as to why, rest assured. For some reason, Vegas has decided to take this weekend where no other GP weekend has gone before. There's a concert with the random assortment of performers. But wait, there's more. Now the drivers are popping up in the sky like freaking daisies. Literally the Hunger Games without the murder and all the crazy. If there's any driver who's ever needed the odds in his favor, it's Charles, who never volunteers as tribute and yet somehow could always use a savior. Anyways, come FP1, and it turns out I was praying for the wrong prancing horse. A loose drainage cover obliterated Carlos's car. But at least FIA showed remorse by giving fans some coupons and offering Carlos a penalty of 10 grid places. Because nothing says sorry like a big fuck you in everyone's faces. Except for Toto's, who thinks this entire event has been excellently planned, okay? He probably has the evidence printed out, so it's best to just nod and be on our way. As for Charles, the odds were certainly in the favor of his Ferrari, as he scored a pick with McDreamy after scoring a pole in quali. And shout out Logan Sargent for finishing P6 in qualifying. That American soil really gets his adrenaline pumping. Okay, let's finally talk about the race. Keep in mind the track has no grip and it's freezing AF, which is not conducive to pace. Poor Charles barely saw the lights go out before Max was like, hello, straight into turn 1. He got a 5-second penalty for it, but he was having too much fun. Then Lando spun and crashed because he had a bump on the track. Bro, how is the safety of the circuit so out of whack? The race was actually kind of exciting. In addition to 2 safety cars, there were a lot of overtakes, battles, and also a couple of budding stars. Lance and Esty Bestie gained 14 and 12 spots respectively. Oh, also super excited about the prospect of an Alpine civil war that continues to loom, which I say respectfully. The most exciting part came with just a few laps to go, when Checo masterfully overtook Charles into P2. You go, Checo, you go. But to prove once and for all that the odds were most certainly in his favor, Charles Katniss Leclerc overtook Checo back under the watchful eye of the Beebs, the official checker flag waver. And now that the 1% race is over, it's time for the 99% show. Of course, Charles, Max, and Checo hop into a Rolls Royce and take the cooldown room on the go. There's one more race before the season finally comes to an end. Bring on Abu Dhabi. Can't wait to see our Fab 20 go full send. Okay. On to analysis. So weirdly, despite Vegas setting out to be stupid and boring and a waste of time, it was actually like a really fun race. I think they'll be like working out the kinks over the next few years and eventually they'll be one of the best. But eventually it'll be good. But this weekend, there were plenty of kinks, as Max made sure to point out at every possible turn. But let's start with the first race-related catastrophe. Announcers aside. So about 9 minutes into FP1, which by the way was a night session, Carlos hit a loose water valve cover on the track and it brought the session to a screeching halt. The damage was so bad, apparently Carlos could see the ground through the floor of the car. The damage included a destroyed chassis, energy store, and power unit, and he also apparently couldn't feel his legs for a hot second, so it could have been so much worse. Subsequent issues from this included damage to Esteban's car, as well as Lance getting a 5-grid penalty for failing to adhere to yellow flag conditions. So the FIA and F1's response made a lot of sense. The session was yellow flagged and then red flagged before everyone was asked to leave the grandstands as they tried to fix the issue. Tragically hilarious is this one photo of like 10 officials standing over this tiny hole in the ground trying to figure out what to do. I'll link it in the show notes. It's fucking hilarious. They're like, it looks like a joke. The session ended up restarting over 2 hours later, which was like 2 a.m. local time. What's worse is that the fans were not allowed to return to watch FP2, and to compensate for this, F1 of course refunded everyone's ticket. Psych. They didn't do that. First, they released a statement saying basically like, well, you saw FP1, so you're good. And then later they were like, to be generous, like, for all the fans that missed out on FP2, they also missed out on FP1, but that's by the by. We've given out some coupons to our store. Spend some money there. It's just so rude. Fans paid like an extortionate amount of money to be there in the first place. This was like an insanely overpriced Grand Prix, and like they can't refund them for FP2. How expensive was I can't even imagine how expensive FP2 was. It's just classic F1 and it's so unnecessary. Just refund them. Might be worse than all of this is the fact that the FIA decided to give Carlos a 10-grid penalty for changing his power unit. Like, are you kidding? It's your fault he needed to change his power unit. You didn't secure the drain valve cover. Hello? Like, why are you punishing him? It's actually so absurd that there are no words, to the point where like Carlos is never one to be quiet when he feels slighted. Like in the past, he would always complain very aggressively, very vocally in interviews and on the radio. I don't think he even knew what the words were to complain about this. Like, it was so appalling, and he was just like, he just didn't have the words for it. So Ferrari's response was naturally furious, but before I get into Fred's fury, can I just say that I shouldn't laugh, but it was so funny. Every time he talked about the damage that was inflicted on Carlos's car, he kept saying that Carlos damaged his monocoque, which I think is French for like the chassis / frame of the car. But every quote is just like, Carlos has damaged his monocoque. It is damaged. We will need to fix it by FP2. The monocoque is damaged. Just can't help but laugh. I'm 12. In the press conference, though, Fred was like, this is unacceptable. But, like, no one will let him just be angry, which he had every right to be. Tom Clarkson, every time Fred tried to say how he was feeling when asked, it's not like he was just sitting there venting. Tom Clarkson would be like, but, like, let's look at the bigger picture. And Fred was like, this is the only picture I need. I don't need a bigger picture. And Tom Clarkson is like, sure. But what does this event mean for Ferrari? And Fred is like, I'm not talking about this today. Like, he went, okay, the show is the show and everything is going well. But, like, I just think this is unacceptable for F1 today. And at that point, Toto muttered something that I couldn't hear. And Fred responded, yes, but Toto, you would be upset in my situation. Which is fair. And then Tom Clarkson butts in and goes, Fred, like he's chastising him. And he's like, well, this is the last time we'll get a chance to speak to you this weekend. And Fred literally goes, finally, some good news. And then Tom Clarkson keeps trying to ask him questions. Like, read the room, dude. Fred is pissed. Rightfully so. And no one is like being like, yeah, you have a right to be pissed. Like, yes, this is horrible. They just keep asking him about the event. It's so bizarre. And at that point, when Tom keeps trying to push, Toto intervenes and said that Tom is setting himself up for trouble because, like, he's not going to get anything out of Fred. But he is clearly not doing this, as we find out in a minute, that he's not doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He just, like, straight up doesn't agree with Fred. And as they're talking about this, Fred just butts in. He goes, can I leave now? He couldn't. Tom goes, we'll come back to you, Fred. And Fred's like, great. Later in the weekend, he continued to express how frustrated and upset he was about how the situation was handled and the fact that the FIA caused all this damage to his car. And remember, this is going to negatively affect his cost cap because this is coming out of his cost cap, which means they have less money to spend on other things when it was caused by the FIA not putting a freaking cover on the valve or whatever. But, like, honestly, Fred is always so happy-go-lucky. So, like, you know it's bad. But, like, I just love how straight up he is. He just, like, says it exactly how he feels, which is, like, serious Max vibes. He just gives it off a little differently. He's a bit happier. He's, like, little plump and happy. Whereas Max comes off a little angry. Okay, so what actually might be worse than all of this is Toto's response. Toto, like, went off in the same press conference when he was asked about whether he thought this was bad for the sport. The comments, by the way, on this are hilarious because everyone's like, well, now we know that Toto's invested in this event based on how visceral his reaction was. It was crazy. But I'll read the quote out loud, but truly I'm going to link it and you have to listen to it if you haven't heard it because I'm not doing it justice without a German accent. The German accent makes it worse. So he says this is not a black mark on the sport. This is nothing. This is Thursday night. We have a free practice session 1 that we're not doing. They're going to seal the drain covers and nobody's going to talk about that tomorrow morning anymore. It's FP1. How can you even dare? He said, how can you even dare trying to talk bad about an event that's setting new standards for everything? You're speaking about a fucking drain cover that's been undone. That's happened before. That's nothing. This is FP1. Give credit to the people that have set up the Grand Prix, that have made this sport so much bigger than it ever was. Liberty has done an awesome job. And just because in FP1 a drain cover has become undone, we should be moaning? The car is broken. That's like a shame for Carlos. It could have been dangerous. So between the FIA and the track and everybody, we need to analyze to make sure that this is not happening again. But talking about how this is a black mark on the sport on a Thursday evening, nobody watches in European time anyway. All right, a few counterpoints. First, what does Liberty have to do with anything? It's the FIA's responsibility to check the safety of the track and also not to hand out penalties for mistakes they made. No one was talking about Liberty, but go off, Toto. Second of all, I think my favorite part about this incredibly impassioned rant about the success of this sport and everything that Liberty has done to raise it up was his last line that no one's watching anyway. Like, maybe we shouldn't be praising the organizers that much if no one's watching. And it's just stupid. Like, Max was asked about what he thinks, Max obviously defended Carlos. And then he also said that in regard to Toto, he would be saying something completely different if it was his own driver in his own car. But he expects nothing else from him. Same. Love Toto, but he gets so dumb sometimes. This is literally 2.0 of the you change your car, blah, 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 blah. Checo has said your car is bad. I haven't printed it out. Change your fucking car. No, you change your fucking car. Anyway, FP2 took place like 2 hours after it was meant to, and there were no fans present. I think it was 2 a.m. local time. And it was funny. The next day after, like, they'd been up until like 4 a.m. I don't even know how late they were up after FP2. And they were doing media. George said in an interview, "I've had 4 naps today. I don't know what time it is." Like, funny, but like, does it really make sense to like sleep deprive the drivers? Couldn't they have skipped FP2? Is that not allowed? Like, and also maybe then Ferrari wouldn't have had to rush to repair the like monocoque in time for FP2. Like, maybe we could have all chilled, you know? Also, didn't they need to reopen the roads? Aren't these regular roads in Vegas? Like, was the strip actually shut down till 4 a.m.? That's crazy. No wonder everyone hates them. All right, moving on. Wow, I got really distracted. Moving on to quali. Lance actually knocked Lando out in Q1, and it was very cute because they panned to Chloe and the mom, like, cheering very excitedly. It was very cute. In Q2, Esteban and Max got into a kerfuffle, and Esteban went, that's a joke, honestly. Max diving into turn 1 like crazy. And Max goes, what a stupid idiot. And then, like, in his interview later, I'm gonna have to find the actual quote. He was basically like, well, he did something dumb, so I was like, well, if you're gonna do this now, then I'm gonna ruin your turn 1, and then that happened, so it's fine. And my favorite tweet about it was that someone was like, I love that Max just decided that Esteban's not gonna be in qualifying anymore. Max just decided, I don't think so. Also, Logan qualified into Q3. How exciting. He finished P7. Which later got changed to P6 because of Carlos's grid penalty. But Charles qualified pole. He got first position. Carlos qualified P2, which obviously becomes P12. And also Lance qualified 14th, but because of his 5 grid place penalty for overtaking under yellow flags, he gets demoted to 19th. But don't worry, he'll figure it out. He'll figure it out. So the starting grid for the race on Sunday is Saturday night. This race, whatever, for the race is as follows. Charles, Max, George, Pierre, Alex, Logan, Valtteri, Kevin, Fernando, Lewis, Checo, Carlos, Nico, Daniel, Lando, Esteban, Guan Yu, Oscar, Lance, and Yuki. Did you catch that? Okay, so on to the race. Finally. Okay, so quick preface. I watched at the F1 arcade in London. The whole place is like F1 on crack. Everything is shaped like a track. The lights, the fixtures in the bathroom, the Christmas tree was covered in some track also. They love a neon track layout. But honestly, the actual environment was so much fun. I got there at 5:30 to reserve a spot, and it was packed. 5:30 in the morning. Some people got there at 5. I thought I'd be fine. I wasn't. It was literally packed. But it was so much fun to watch in a room full of people who are just as excited as you are. Like, every time something happened, the entire room would react collectively. Like, they would cheer or boo or gasp in unison. And it literally felt like there was like those guys from Shrek holding up like reaction signs, you know? Everyone was just so in sync, and it was just so much fun. And if you're ever not looking at the screen, the reaction from everyone lets you know you missed something, which annoyingly happened to me every time I looked like out the window. By the way, out the window, St. Paul's Cathedral. Yeah, to my right, F1, to my left, St. Paul's. Amazing. The only thing I will say that is unfortunate about being an F1 fan in England is that you're basically in the land of anti-Max. And I say anti-Max and not pro-Lewis because I think that while everyone loves Lewis and most people are Lewis fans, they are much more passionate about being anti-Max. So I really have to keep my Max feelings to myself, tone them down, be like, whatever, because they turn visceral. You say anything pro Max, my God. It's like you've announced World War III. It's insane. All right, so the start. Right into the first turn, Max dove past Charles, very controversially into turn 1. He did win the lead over Charles, though Charles did fight him for it down the first straight, but Max secured it before the end of the lap. He later did get a 5-second penalty for it, to which he didn't give a fuck. His response was, "That's fine, send them my regards." It's like very much the same energy as that time when he was like, when they find him and he was like, "I hope they have a nice lunch" or something. Okay, so meanwhile behind him, and I'm going to be honest, I don't have the ability to replay, and I swear they were replaying a lot less during this race, but like I can't come home and as I'm outlining, rewatch stuff as easily as I can at home because I just don't have access to the full race. But somewhere behind them, still during the start, Alonso seems to start spinning out of nowhere, which seemed to inadvertently cause Carlos to understeer and contact Lewis. So I can't say 100% what happened here, but that's how I understood the situation. There was a lot of debris everywhere, but it really seemed to take forever for a virtual safety car to come up, but it did eventually, which triggered a slew of pit stops from Alonso, who had damage from whatever happened to him, and Valtteri and Checo both also had contact and came into the pits for some quickie repairs, and the virtual safety car was supposed to end in lap 3, but then no sooner did that announcement come out that Lando found himself in the wall in what looked horrific, terrible crash. Like there was just a fire, sparks, tires flying. It was just bizarre. He also nearly took out Oscar. Luckily Oscar survived. I'm surprised no one else got taken out. The culprit, a bump on the track that, combined with the cold tires and complete lack of grip, was just a total recipe for disaster. His radio after was a little scary because he was like asked if he was okay and there was no response, and then the engineer tried again and was like a bit more frantic. He's like, "Lando, are you okay?" And finally Lando gave like a very labored, "Yeah, I'm fine," but like gave like such an intense groan. It was very scary. Damn, why do I always cry? So fucking weird. But I think like the G-force and the impact, it really takes the wind out of you. And that sounds gentle for what's happening when I say take the wind out of you. It just sounds like they're a little out of breath. But like he was taken to the medical center and then to the hospital for checks. What do they check when they do that? Like when they check after having such a high impact crash, do they check for brakes? Do they check the head? What are they checking? Like what is in danger? Anyway, he was fine, and he did take selfies on the gurney in the hospital, which is very Lando. But how is it that there were now 2 incidents caused by the conditions of the track? And this is not the first time this year or last year, but this year there seems to be more almost, like with Qatar. Now this, like the FIA keeps putting the drivers into conditions or into environments that aren't safe. And that's like their number one job. Like that's literally their number one job, is to make sure everyone's safe and not dead. So far no one's dead, but like just put on the cover on the hole and smooth out the track. The end. Anyway, so after the safety car, once debris was cleared, Max led at the restart. Side note, I was very excited for a hot second that Logan was still in 6th and holding on to it, but sadly it didn't last because tires gave out, especially after the safety car. Everyone was going so slow that the tires were super cold, so it was like very dangerous for a lot of the drivers, and not all of them were able to get going in the way that they should have. But like this is probably a good time to mention the fact that the circuit is like fresh, so like it's very smooth and there's no grip, which is not very conducive to heating up the tires and to having grip and to just being able to use an F1 car to its full capabilities. Also, it's fucking freezing because for some reason, I guess the FIA didn't realize it's cold in the desert at night. So the tires are not warming up properly. All of that to say, it's giving extenuating circumstances to the drivers and the teams coming up with strategies to make sure everyone stays safe and fast in these conditions. Again, these are kinks that could be worked out in the future. Like maybe let's not do a night race in the dead of winter in Vegas. Maybe let's quadruple check the track to make sure there are no bumps or valve covers just hanging about, you know, like basic stuff. A very exciting thing that happened during the first half of the race was that Max was still leading Charles, but Charles was closing in, but Max was still leading. And at one point, Max started complaining about his tires, and so he was told to come in. But before he could come in, Charles overtook him, which is very exciting because it's on merit and not like him automatically gaining a spot because someone's in the pit. So way to go, Charles. So as Max was trying to make up spots from coming out in 11th after his pit stop, his first great overtake was on Carlos, where he and George sort of did like a unison double overtake, leaving poor Carlos in the dust. But then Max set his sights on George and attempted to overtake him on a turn, as Max loves to do. They ended up having contact, and Max started bitching that George didn't leave him enough room, which I agreed with, and so did the Stews, because they gave George a 5-second penalty. And it turns out George also agreed with them because he said it was his own fault that he didn't see Max there. So then this incident triggered a second safety car because the track was littered with debris, and there was a bunch of free pit stops that were taking place during this time. But once the race resumed, Charles was still holding on to the lead, but Checo was hot on his heels. So before we get to them, there was a very exciting yet random battle between the Alpines, where Esteban and Pierre just kept like overtaking each other, like shoo, 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 over and over, until finally the team got on the radio and was like, guys, could you like please stop risking millions of dollars in damage? Just keep your position. I still feel like we're barely like keeping the lid on that drama, and it's all just gonna pop off next year. Like the lid on the water valve on the track is just gonna pop the fuck off, and we're gonna get full unhinged Pierre and Esteban. It's gonna be great. Horrible, but great. So now, like, back to the front. It wasn't long before Checo overtook Charles into first, which might have generated cheers in Vegas, but it certainly generated a very little reaction in London. Just like, if we're lucky if we don't boo something positive going on with Red Bull, if there's just like a silence with like a random woo in the back, for the lone Red Bull fan living here. So not long after Checo overtook Charles into first, Charles overtook Checo back into first, and now it's Charles, Checo, Max. And then Max overtakes Checo into second, which puts new pressure on Charles, who has just been fighting for his dang life this entire race. Unfortunately for Charles, Max lunges at him not long after and secures P1 and just like zooms ahead-ish. It's not really zooming for Max. He's like a few seconds ahead, but still. And this is where it gets exciting. So in the last 10 laps, we, by the way, get 2 more DNFs. Both Yuki and Nico suffer technical issues, and they both actually pull over on the same emergency road. So there was no actual stop to the race. But more exciting was that up front, Checo was gaining on Charles and ended up overtaking him with just a few laps to go in like an incredible lunge. It was so good. But Charles was not backing down. So he pursued Checo over the next couple of laps, and literally with like the finish line in sight, Justin Bieber looming over in his weird leather jacket, Charles pushes ahead and just beats Checo to the finish line. And it was so exciting. The entire room was screaming. Also, how fun this is, like the second time in a row that Checo is fighting literally until the very last second. He's lost every time, so that sucks for him, but he's been fighting his little butt off literally to the last dying breath, and I love it. All right, moving on. I will say that the one great thing Vegas did was swap the cooldown room for a cooldown car. The top 3 had their debrief section in the back of a Rolls Royce for literally like the longest drive ever. But here are my play-by-play thoughts. So first, Checo gets into the car, no questions asked. Then the Red Bull engineer slides in. Then Charles approaches the car and has the most like what the fuck look on his face, like, am I supposed to get in this? Then he gets in and then he starts frantically like looking around for Max. Then Max arrives and they all realize there's nowhere for Max to sit. So the engineer is like, oh, maybe this Rolls Royce is not for me. So they all slide out. Max gets in the middle and then Charles slides in. I also dies and he was like, imagine winning the race and then you're stuck in the middle seat, which he loved because he hates Max. So anyway, the engineer did not get into the Rolls Royce. I have no idea how he got to the ceremony on time, but that's not our problem. Also, Max in the middle looks extra funny because both Checo and Charles are basically wearing the exact same suit. So he's like squished up in between two little Ferrari looking drivers, and it's just funny. Also, a couple of notes about the car setup. One, it's a little tight in the back, I'm not gonna lie. Max is manspreading as he's Max-splaining, and it just feels a little claustrophobic to me. Also, they can't watch replays, which I think often help into generating really interesting insight and conversation. But if we get them into the back of like Arthur Weasley's car and like set up some TVs back there, I think we've got ourselves quite the setup. Except for the fact that Vegas is probably the only track requiring like a 5-mile drive to the podium. Like, I don't know why, like, you need so much transportation from Park Ferme to the ceremony. Like, surely you can be more effective with that layout. But anyway, side note, another side note. Speaking of Park Ferme, did anyone notice that all the drivers were lining up to get weighed? Like, could they not afford more than one set of scales? They have all that money from FP2. Buy a couple of scales. Maybe we don't need 19 drivers lining up to get weighed. But in the actual car, one of the moments that had me dying was like 3 minutes into the ride, Charles suddenly goes, "Where are we going?" As if now it's dawned on him that he's like going somewhere. And Max goes straight to the nightclub, skip the rest. Funny. All right, so the actual podium ceremony starts with like it's at the Bellagio, and it starts with like a fountain light show. So I guess, I don't know, are they just standing up there on the podium while that happens? Were they underneath? I can't remember. It was weird. But what I did like is that the graphics that they used to announce each person coming up was like a slot machine. So it was like, third, Red Bull, Checo. It was cool. Also, they were spraying the sparkling wine much more aggressively than normal, like from like a short range rather than long distance. Like Charles and Max were just coming up directly to the person and just going. It's an intense stream to get directly in your face. A couple of interview moments. Again, like I said at the beginning, I'm very happy to report that Max was much happier with this Grand Prix after winning it. I still wouldn't say he would ever call it his favorite by any means, and I'm sure he still loathes the entire spectacle part of it, but he did come around to the track and say it was fun to drive. And I'm sure it is when you're winning and not hitting random loose valve covers and bumps on the road. Also loved Carlos getting a little petty in his interview and saying that he's very happy to finish ahead of the people who wanted him penalized, aka Mercedes. Haha, lol. All right, driver of the day officially was Charles Leclerc, which I have absolutely no qualms with. Excellent drive from him. So proud for him for not being cursed today and not being involuntarily chosen as the tribute. But I would also love to shout out Esti Bestie, who went from P16 to P4, which I think is 12 positions, and Lance, who went from P19 to P5, which I think is 14 positions. Incredible work from those two. But also, what is going on with Lance? He's had like a really good several weeks. I don't know if he's just so happy that the season's almost over, that he's just like thriving, or maybe he's had a change of heart, refreshed. I don't know what's going on, but he's been doing really good work. For me, dig in the box, there's only one clear answer, and that is the organizers. Like, whoever is responsible for the catastrophic conditions of the track, like 2 cars got fucked by your track. It's your fault. And B, whoever's responsible for compensating fans fairly, like the fact that fans were given some store coupons to the F1 store is an actual joke, and like also just beyond rude. Like, sure, they might not want to watch FP2 at 2 a.m., but like reimburse them or give them the option, or like Weird. All right, so the results were Max in first, followed by Max in first, followed by Charles, Checo, Esteban, Lance, Carlos, Lewis, George, Fernando, Oscar, Pierre, Alex, Kevin, Daniel, Guan Yu, Logan, and Valtteri. And our DNFs include Yuki in lap 46, Nico in lap 45, and Lando in lap 2. In terms of standings, this week Checo has secured second in the Drivers' Championship, which I think also means he's secured his spot for next year, if those rumors were to be believed. So, yay, Checo. You can relax. And then in terms of the actual Drivers' Championship, so that means that Max and Checo have secured first and second, which is a first for Red Bull ever. They've never finished a year with both of the top two drivers being theirs. I believe Lewis has also secured P3. The tightest battle at the moment, I think, is for fourth, with Carlos and Fernando equal in points, and Lando, because of this DNF, is now 5 points behind them. So really, truly, it's all to play for them next week. In the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull has secured first, but Mercedes is only 4 points ahead of Ferrari, so next week could be a huge game changer for Ferrari. And McLaren is 11 points ahead of Aston. So those second and fourth places in the Constructors' Championship could still change next week. We'll just have to wait and see. So that's it for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Next up is Abu Dhabi, and it's the final race of the year. Still deciding how to watch it. Not sure if I want to pay £36 to go back to the F1 arcade, but I might just find a pub nearby. Anyways, can't wait for next week. I'll be back, and I do still plan to do off-season content. Would love to hear your thoughts and what you want to see, hear, learn, watch all together. So email me your thoughts on that, thoughts on the race. And as always, make sure you subscribe, review, and share with any potential boxes. And make sure you follow at BoxBox F1 Pod to keep up in between races. See you soon. Box.